Hello and welcome to this episode of Fresh Start. Today I'm joined by the lovely Jo Slessor, who is a specialist coach dealing with midlife stage for women. And the reason that I've asked Jo to come on today is because we're seeing a real rise in the grey divorce. A lot of media is talking about it. And in fact, numbers have doubled in the last decade. And I myself have certainly seen that since lockdown in particular. And so I thought it would be really great to get Jo on, as she specialises in this area and everything that's happening at this time, to really understand what's going on for people and how to really navigate this in the best way possible. So firstly, Jo, thank you so much for coming and agreeing to talk to us today, and sharing your valuable sort of skills and advice. So just in your experience, obviously, you're working with a lot of people who are going through this at the stage. Why is it that we're seeing more people at that kind of life stage choosing to divorce or separate from their partners?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on, Nicole. I'm really happy to be here. As you say, I work with women in midlife, which is a massive, generally unspoken about transition that takes us from our being in our peak to being in a place where actually we begin to wonder who we are and where we're going and what the rest of our life is going to look like. And we sort of get to a point where we sort of think, well, if not now, when? So I think it's really interesting that you talked about grey divorce, because it's something that in the women that I've worked with, nobody's actually got to that point or coming out of that point. But I can absolutely see how your life is changing and how it's very much a time in which you're asking questions about your life. So thinking about why at this point you might be seeing more numbers of people going through divorce in midlife, I think there's quite a few things going on, really. I think one of them, perhaps, so speaking as a woman in midlife, and I am of a different generation to yourself, for instance. I have had a pretty traditional marriage where I worked before I was married. I had a good career, but when I got married, my salary was always the second salary. When we had children, I was the one that stopped working, fitted in part-time jobs as and when I could. And I think that there are quite a few women of my generation for whom that is a reality. But now I think more and more women are becoming more financially independent. They have more money to spend. They're coming into their pensions, once you reach the late 50s, early 60s. And there's two aspects, I think, aren't there? I think possibly having that financial independence means that women have other options. I think that women who have stayed at home for their children for a lot of time really feel it when their children leave home, and filling that hole and looking around and saying, well, what happens next, and who am I, and where do I go from here? So it's interesting. But the other thing that I think we're talking about so much more now, and that women can't ignore in the way that we used to, is the menopause and the impact that has on our lives. Because for a lot of women, it's like an earthquake in terms of changes, the hormonal changes, the physical changes, the body changes. We don't look at ourselves in the same way as we used to. I'm sure that our husbands see changes in us that they never expected. And we look at each other to say, well, actually, who is this person? Are you the person I married? And we all go through that, and we all find our way through one way or another. And I know that, that for me, there was definitely that point at which we sort of looked at each other. The children had left home, and it's just, right, it's you and me now, kid. Is this what we want? Is this, can we do this? So, I think there's a few things there. Definitely the support that you need going through perimenopause has to be there from your husband, because if they don't understand what you're going through, it can be very divisive. in all sorts of ways. But you come through on the other side, and actually you get your mojo back. You suddenly figure out, you know, who you are. That actually being in your 50s is not so bad. You're free of, you know, free of so many responsibilities that you had before. But you're a different person. I'm not the same person that I was in my 20s or my 30s or my 40s even. And actually for me, and I think for an awful lot of women, and we are talking about this now, is your 50s is the time where you literally, Brené Brown says, it's a midlife unraveling. We talk about midlife crisis, but there is definitely a midlife questioning and unraveling, and looking at whether the person that you've become wants to carry on living the same life that you've been living.
Do you think there's kind of, we've moved on a little bit in our society, that's more acceptable to have those questions and to make different choices that perhaps years ago weren't perhaps available to our kind of older generations, where those opportunities to question and decide what you want in life and make, you know, career changes, for example? It used to be a case of you married for life, you had the same career for life, you know, you had a very sort of set path to tread, which had been tread many times before. And now, you know, as a society, we kind of question more, and we travel more, and we know we have a lot more change, and we accept more change than we once perhaps did.
Absolutely. You know, I think, you know, sort of the generations even before me, you would have been, you know, your mother would say, well, you know, you've made your bed, you're going to lie in it.
Yeah.
And these days, where we're so much more aware of well-being, we're aware of our mental and physical well-being. And actually being in a place where you are sad, you are unhappy, you're not valued, you're not enjoying where you are, I think we look over the fence and we look at where we could be. And actually, if we value ourselves, that's where we want to be. And I think it's accepted that you know, that if we need to make changes in our lives, if we respect ourselves, we will do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And purpose as well, I guess, as well. A bit what you were saying about that kind of empty nest is having that purpose in it. And if it was a case of, it used to be years ago, as a woman, your purpose was to raise the family and to be the homemaker, and that's very much changed. You know, women are having more careers and choosing not to, in some cases choosing not to have children, and that's more broadly accepted now. And actually your purpose has changed, and your purpose can change throughout your life depending on where you are in your interests, and as you say, as you've grown as an individual and as a person. And I think people are seeking more of that kind of fulfillment that they perhaps didn't before as well. But also it's interesting that we're all living longer as well, isn't it? Because you were saying that the person you were when you were in your 20s, 30s, 40s, etc., isn't the same person you are today, and nor would your husband be. And there is this kind of, well, life expectancy has, you know, massively increased, and you're not the same people. So, you know, sometimes over time you're moving at very different paces or different directions. And actually what worked years ago doesn't necessarily work today. You've got people who are, some people retire and they're really active, aren't they? And other people are kind of more passive and are ready for a slowing down, and other people are just ramping up. And then you're kind of going to be going at very different speeds and potentially in different directions.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's crucial. And you know, because I've just come back from, you know, a family holiday. We had our adult children with us, which was wonderful. But you know, did quite a lot of reconnecting with my husband. So we are both coming up for 60 and beginning to think about what we want retirement to look like. And we are pretty much on the same page. We have the same kind of energy levels. But I do know a lot of people who don't feel like that, where different partners feel very differently. You know, where it may be one partner who is ready to actually go and live in the West Country close to the kids and be a grandparent and be there for their children, and the other one that says, right, come on, let's go and buy a yacht and sail around the world. And you know, and that is not compatible, is it, as a lifestyle, unless there is an awful lot of other good stuff going on and that you can make it work. But that is, it's very much a kind of midlife relationship issue that can go either way. Yeah.
And actually I've noticed, certainly the work that I do, is quite often with grey divorce, you don't often find that people are necessarily at the same, I mean, you don't ever find this a lot of the time in divorce anyway, that they've both come to this decision together. Usually one person has instigated it, but particularly in older couples, one person might have instigated the divorce and be really excited about this new lease of life that they're going to get, and the other person thought that they were growing old together, and that diversion between the two can be quite really stark and quite challenging to manage. I know you said you haven't actually come across clients who have been specifically in that scenario, but I think that's more common, as I said, when people are older, because you've got kind of two, a bit like what you were saying, two very different ideas about where you're going and whether you're retiring together, or actually someone's going, well, the kids are off hand now, we've done a great job, but I want to now go do this, and I don't think you do, so I don't think this works anymore. And that's quite emotionally very difficult to get your head around. I think with that rejection at that stage of life seems much harder.
Because I think any work with around midlife is around managing transitions. So whatever your transition is, that we're all managing loss. We're managing the loss of parents. We're managing loss of children, in terms of as you say, they're moving out, and those transitions, which put us in a state of grieving, and the loss of a marriage is essentially, you're going to go through a grieving process. If you are that party, whichever party you're on, it's a massive loss in terms of your lifestyle as it is, figuring out what your life moving forward is going to look like. So it's all about managing transitions, managing transitions that are literally to do with age and aging. And I think that if you're managing a transition out of a marriage in midlife, it's like all these other things. It's about, where am I? Who am I now? Who do I want to be? Where do I want to be? What do I want my life to look like? Just as it would be if you'd had a massive career change and said, look, I've been in this all my life, I don't want this anymore. It's, well, where am I now? Where do I want to get? How do I want to feel? And I think coming out of a marriage, you've been feeling a lot of very negative emotions and a lot of stress for a very long time, a lot of confusion, a lot of whatever the opposite of clarity is. You don't know where you're going, you don't know what you're looking for, and therefore when you're coming out of the marriage, what you're looking for is clarity and vision, and looking ahead at where you want to be and how you want to feel in the future, and literally acknowledging your heart's been through a really, really hard time, and that your heart wants to feel some really good positive emotion, and how you're going to find that, which might not be in another relationship. It's got to be in recognizing your own values and your own and your own strengths, and playing to those.
Yeah, definitely, because I think especially when you've been in a long marriage, which usually at this stage you have been in a very long marriage, you've probably been together longer than you've been single, and then it is that trying to resist that temptation to just rush into something else without doing the necessary healing, as you're suggesting, absolutely, and redefining who you are and your values and what's important to you, so that you don't take those issues into the next relationship, which I see at any age actually, but I think it's even harder at this stage, as I said, because your identity has been so wrapped up in being a couple that actually you need to kind of reevaluate who you are, and as you say, what you want, and do that healing and find your own security. Because I think that's the really scary thing about divorce, is there's so many changes that are happening all at once. You kind of lose that sense of security and certainty, which is one of our basic human needs that we're trying to meet at any time. And that's why people end up in sort of survival mode and making really kind of not great decisions, because they're just in fight or flight, because they don't feel safe and secure. And actually it's creating that for yourself before then introducing somebody else.
Absolutely.
And just on the subject of children, because this I think comes up a lot as well, particularly with older couples, is divorcing with children. In my experience with the clients that I've worked with, is actually harder later in life when the children are adults than it is when they're small, because co-parenting still exists when you're older. People think it doesn't, but because you haven't got to do school runs and agree who's having them in summer holidays, but actually it's just as important, because you're still going to have those family occasions, and then there's usually grandchildren and all that kind of stuff. But also just the fact that because children are older, it means that they think that they can have an opinion on the separation or the divorce. They tend to take more sides, and they tend to be told more information than you would share with a child, but they're still your children, and you still have that child-parent relationship no matter how old you get. And I think I've seen that become really tricky to manage, particularly with older and grown-up children. What's your kind of advice around sort of managing that situation?
I think, as a parent of adult children, this is something that builds up over time. How your children evolve into adults within your family, is down to a lot of things. It's down to how you communicate with each other. It's down to what kind of connections you make with each other, how your children move into independence. And I think the kind of things you're going to be dealing with are around your communication and your connection, that your children are going to want the best for both of you. And as adults, I think it's probably easier for them to accept the emotional side. They want to see their mum happy, they want to see their dad happy, without necessarily apportioning blame. Because as adults, as young adults in their 20s, late teens, 20s, or early 30s, they have an understanding of relationships, they have an understanding of emotions, and the understanding that they want to see both sides be happy. So therefore, I think it's about, as a family, being really open in terms of, we need your support to help us to move through this in the way that is the best for us, but also the best for you, so that we can still have those larger family occasions. We can manage things like Christmas and birthdays in an amicable way that just supports everybody, so that we can all enjoy them and not dread them. But I think it's just about communication and working with your children for the fact that this is something that we have to work through together, but essentially the decision is ours, and we need your support.
Yeah, I really like that, actually, working through it as a family, but remembering the decision is ours. I think that's really good advice. And because that's the thing that I think, when children are smaller, people think, oh, it's only till I only have to co-parent till they finish school. And it's not till they finish school, because there will be weddings and birthdays and graduations and grandchildren's parties and Christmases and all the other kind of family events that you will not want to be excluded from or feel awkward at because your ex is there. So it's in everybody's best interest, and especially the children, to find a way to broker, as you say, that amicable relationship, because you are still a family. You're a different shape, but you're very much still a family after the divorce. So actually, I have seen, in particularly in older couples, mediation working as a really good tool for trying to negotiate the divorce, to make it a lot quicker and to make it a lot fairer, and trying to kind of come to the table and collaboratively and work together to divorce, as opposed to sitting on two sides of a courtroom, which we've discussed on here with we had Sam Woodham from the divorce surgery, who's a barrister, saying like court is the worst place for parents to end up and should be avoided at all costs. And that's her day job. She's a barrister, and she's saying judges don't want you there, we don't want you there, it's not a good place to be. And I think particularly when you are a bit older, and hopefully you haven't got to negotiate child arrangements, and hopefully you've built up enough of a kind of a pot of money between the two of you that you can both go on and live comfortably, and everything, because everything comes out in one pot anyway. You can try and meet in the middle and do that as amicably as possible, and take less time over it, because if you're at the point where you've got kind of that empty nest, or you're kind of having that revival, as you kind of say, of kind of really looking at what you want from life, you don't want to be wasting it divorcing your ex. You want to be grabbing it with two hands.
Absolutely.
And making the most of of life, really, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, I think it's the same with anything, isn't it? I think once that decision is made, it's about managing that transition in a really positive way. In the same as any other decision that you make in life, once you make your mind up, if you made your mind up that you want to move, you want to find that perfect house, and you want to sell your house, and you want to get through it as easy as you can. And once you've decided that, you know, you want a new career or a new job, you want to get, you know, you want to manage that, you know, as easily as you can, because the more easily we manage that transition, more quickly we can get on with our lives. And there is, you know, there's a pot of gold on the other side. If that's something that you've, you know, that you've made the decision that you really want, yeah, you just have to get through it and see what's waiting for you on the other side.
I like the analogy of kind of, you know, moving house and changing career, because actually I've talked about that a few times on a few of these interviews around the fact of it just divorce being seen as kind of another, as you say, transition, and approaching it as such, as in there's an emotional journey that I have to go on because there's something that I'm leaving and I'm moving to, but also there's just a process that has to be gone through, that I need to think about having the right support and making really good decisions and staying focused on my end result of the new career or the life after the divorce or the new house, you know, and I need this kind of budget, and I need to do this kind of action, and emotionally I need to manage this kind of process and be a bit kind to myself. And actually, regardless of the transition, you still have to kind of go through those same steps.
I mean, you and I, you know as a coach, whatever kind of coaching model you use, you know, if you use something really simple like the GROW model, whatever goal you set for yourself, you know, you set your goal. Your goal is actually that we've made the decision and we're going to go through a divorce and start a new life. And then you talk about, you know, then it's the realities, and you have to set out what are the realities of this situation? What are the realities practically, financially, emotionally? What are my options? And what's the will and the motivation to make this happen? It's a really simple structure that we can apply to any major life change. And I understand there is a massive emotional aspect to divorce, which there probably isn't in those other things, but that is part of what we have to manage within our reality and our options. And getting support for the emotional side, whether it's by bolstering your well-being, your mental health, having your support network around you, that just becomes one of the tools that you use along the way.
Yeah. And also, obviously, you know, you and I are both coaches, so we would say this, but there is that kind of support available that I think years ago there wasn't. You know, there's definitely been a turn tide in the sense of divorce coaches, and, you know, the work that I do around co-parenting and blended families, and, you know, the work that you're doing specifically for women who are going through this life stage, who really, you know, who have really honed in on this particular you know, stage in your life and this particular transition, who really know what they're talking about, that can help you know, guide people through it. There is more mediation and things like that to try and avoid the stereotypical kind of going to court and what we're expected of divorce and the battle and everything that gets played out in the media. Actually, the reality doesn't really look like that, and there's so many more options available to people now to get that right support, and to work with coaches like yourself or me, depending on what they're going through. And it is a very different landscape now than I think what it was once before, where you kind of felt like you were on your own and you had to try and muddle through and you didn't really know what you were doing, and it's a bit scary and no one else was doing the same.
And you know, and I think the whole idea of sort of shame and blame and guilt and all those things that come with it, yes, they are still there. They're still going to be there on a personal level, but I don't think society looks on it in the same way. I think there is an aspect of older women probably still holding on to that, those kind of labels, but as I say, society in general would support anybody's health and well-being over just staying put in a really bad situation.
Yeah, definitely. And I think quite often you're labelled as brave actually when you go through this, and you don't think you're brave at the time, and you certainly don't feel brave at the time. I remember being told that when I was going through my own divorce in my sort of late 20s. Oh, you're really brave. And I remember thinking, I don't feel brave, and I don't think I'm brave. I feel like I'm just correcting a mistake that I knew I was kind of making at the time. But actually, I think people kind of admire you for saying, well, I wasn't happy, or this wasn't working, or we just wanted different things, especially if you can do it amicably and it's not kind of a war zone, and you can do it in kind of a really respectful, dignified way and walk away, as I said, because, you are still a family. I think there's something really aspirational, really, something that people admire in that, actually. We need to talk about that more, because I think there are stories of people who are doing that, but it's not really played out as much as I think it could be, in us sharing our stories, but also in the media as well.
Yeah, but I think, interestingly, I think the media is starting to come around. I think there are far more stories of models where people have worked things out amicably. Even in the horrible sort of Daily Mail celebrity things, you do quite often see quite good, more positive stories, rather than those sort of the ones that are shouted out and go to court and are all generally about money, rather than about feelings and about children and about about people's life, well-being and emotional situation. So I think, again, there is a move towards supporting and reporting more positive models of divorce.
Brilliant. Okay, so as a takeaway, if someone watching this video is going through or considering that and faced with that kind of, I think I need to go through this transition, this is exactly where I'm at, I'm really questioning how I feel about myself or my marriage or etc., kind of what would your takeaways be, and how would they get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out and speak to you, Jo?
Yeah, so the takeaways for me, so I use a kind of process that I call quiet empowerment, and it's about giving women that inner strength to manage their lives and their transitions. And I think that quiet inner strength to get through a situation like this, that is possibly so life-changing. So I would be saying, as you've already said, firstly, don't rush into making any decisions. And if that means, renting a home and living in a place for a while rather than buying a place, if that means, taking your time to work out if you want to change your job or major lifestyle, sit quietly, watch, listen, feel. Well, how does this feel? Does this feel good? And then the next thing is about working out what your values are as an independent woman. Your values as part of a couple are always going to be moved and shifted and leaned into by your partner, because that's what marriage is all about. But it's working out what your personal values are, how you want to live, how you want to, what kind of lifestyle you want, what kind of sort of financial situation do you want? Do you want to work? Do you have to work? How is that going to fit into your life? How do you want your family to be? And it's as though it becomes about your family values and your personal values. And once you live your own values, life becomes a lot less difficult. So it's about working out what your values are, and then your strengths. What's important to you, and your strengths. What are you good at? How can you play to your strengths to develop the relationships with everybody that need to be managed, to play to your strengths to work out, what kind of life you want to have. And it is just empowering yourself by listening to yourself and listening and saying, how do I want to feel? How do I want to live? What do I want my life to look like? And once you have a vision of that, then you can say, okay, I know what I want. How am I going to get there?
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you, Jo. And obviously your details will be on our website, but just how does someone get in touch if they want to have a follow-up conversation with you?
So you can look up my website, which has got all the details about me, about how I got where I am, and how I can work with you. And I am at www.joslessor.com. I also have an Instagram account, which is at Jo Slessor. And those are the best ways to find me. You can email me at jo@joslessor.com. I love having, virtual cuppas with people. If people just want to have an informal chat, I'm always available for that. So please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much for your time, Jo. That was really helpful, and a really interesting subject that I think, as I said, we're seeing a lot more of, and I know is really relevant to our membership. So thank you so much for your time today. And and I'm sure people will get in touch.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Take care.
Bye.